married to Serafina for 3 years, and during that time she supported another guy. She gave him my new suit and my Patek Philippe watch. When she found out he had kidney trouble, she rushed to get me to sign a donation agreement. Later, I discovered that this guy was actually her first love. What really angered me was that after I refused to sign, she turned around and accused me of not having compassion. I put some sleeping pills in the food, and they forced me into the operating room. Her first love finally recovered, but she lost her mind and kept kneeling by my bed. She cried, begging for my forgiveness, pleading for me not to divorce her. Just got off work, rubbing my aching forehead. I opened the fridge hoping to grab some health supplements, but all the expensive stuff was gone, and the fridge was empty. Serafina, did you take my supplements from the fridge? Laughter from Serafina filled the room, mixed with a man's voice. I opened the door, and she quickly wiped the smile off her face, a hint of annoyance flashing as she hung up the phone. Thaddeus, could you show a little bit of courtesy? You just barge in like that. Aren't you worried I might be changing in here? I chuckled. You're my wife. What's wrong with me seeing you change? I expected Serafina to laugh, but her expression darkened instead. Suddenly, she grabbed a pillow and threw it at my head. The soft pillow hit my face, and I felt a sharp sting right away. I couldn't help but yell, covering my head and calling out in pain. Serafina glanced at me without a word, got up from the bed, and as she walked past me, she bumped into me hard. I couldn't stand up straight and ended up banging my forehead hard against the door. How am I supposed to know where your supplements went? You don't even know how to take them, so don't blame others. Don't treat me like a babysitter, making me run around all day. Serafina stormed off to the guest room, fuming and clutching the blanket. I barely opened my eyes and noticed a blush on her face. After 3 years of marriage, there haven't been many times when she took the initiative. It's so rare that I start to wonder if there's another man in her life. But whenever I ask her about it, she always shyly hides her head under the blanket and plays cute. Ugh. It's frustrating. I'm just someone with simple needs. Did we get married just so we could sleep together? While sitting on the edge of the bed to catch my breath, I saw that the shopping bag on the floor was open. My new suit and Patek Philippe watch are gone, leaving only a receipt that shows I actually bought them. From the next room, I hear Serafina's sharp cries, making me blush, confused. I furrow my brow and rush to the guest room. Serafina is holding her phone up, seemingly on a video call with someone. As I push the door open, she suddenly starts to sob, her tears blurring her eyes, looking really moved. She was mumbling someone's name, Caspian. When I walked in, Serafina let out a sharp scream and quickly pulled the blanket over her bare body. Thaddeus, how long are you going to keep this up? Why do you always barge into my room? Go find something better to do. I irritably looked up and asked, where did you put my suit? Every time I buy something new, it just seems to vanish without a trace. I've never bothered Serafina about these little things before, but she definitely knows I have an important meeting tomorrow. I need that new suit and the Patek Philippe to make a good impression. Serafina shot me an annoyed glance as she casually sprawled out on the bed. I just donated the clothes and that broken watch. You only need a little compassion since you have plenty of money. Serafina got out of bed and shoved me out the door with some force. I wanted to say more, but she slammed the door shut, leaving me no chance to respond. When I got back to the room, I found our wedding photo tossed in the trash. Instead, there's this rough-looking funny ornament. It's a gift from the person Serafina is sponsoring. Ever since she got it, she can't seem to put it down. She really seems to like this little trinket, but I've seen her dolls and charms before. She just shoved them in the closet. I can still picture her dismissive expression back then. Thaddeus, you're so childish. Every day, money is spent on these useless things. I chuckled quietly and picked up the wedding photo from the trash can, putting it away in the drawer. In that drawer, there were also the wedding rings that belonged to me and Serafina. I wanted a unique wedding ring, so I brought in a top designer. When Serafina received the ring, she wore it on her ring finger all day long, not wanting to take it off at all. At some point, she started taking off her ring and often mocked me, insisting we sleep separately. I lay in bed, Serafina's joyful laughter echoing in my mind. Has Serafina lost interest in me? The next afternoon, my stomach felt a bit off, and I was thinking about heading to the cafeteria for a meal. Just then, Serafina rushed over, holding a thermal container, smiling at me from afar. Thaddeus, I brought you lunch. A passing colleague teased while glancing at me. The boss is really lucky. The boss's wife delivers food personally. I smiled happily and gently held Serafina in my arms. Her forehead was slick with sweat, so I carefully wiped it away. Why are you in such a rush? You must be exhausted. Serafina pulls me into the office, opens a lunchbox, and feeds me herself. My expression changes immediately when I see the food. Since I have to socialize for work, I often end up at drinking parties. There was even a time when I drank so much that I ended up with a bleeding stomach and had to be rushed to the hospital. Serafina rushed to the hospital when she got the call, visibly upset, with tears in her eyes as she leaned over my bed. The doctor specifically told her to make sure I eat light and avoid greasy and spicy foods. However, the meal she brought today was packed with chili peppers. I looked at the greasy fatty meat and the colorful peppers, and my stomach was in pain. It was churning, and I could feel sour bile rising in my throat. Serafina picked up a piece of fatty meat with her chopsticks and offered it to me. I instinctively felt like throwing up. I quickly grabbed the trash can under the table and started to vomit uncontrollably, with stomach acid rising up as well. Serafina hurriedly patted my back and handed me some water to rinse my mouth. She anxiously smoothed down her dress, worried about getting any unpleasant smell on it. Thaddeus, isn't this your favorite dish? Are you seriously acting like this because you know I need something from you? My stomach hurts, and tears just started rolling down my face. Serafina frowned and kept her distance. She pulled out a document from her bag with the words kidney donation agreement printed in bold. I was still in shock, unable to process what was happening. Serafina had already pulled out the agreement, ready to grab my hand and get me to sign. I instinctively pushed her hand away and asked in shock, "What is this?" She casually replied, "Can't you read? It's just a kidney donation. You've got 2 kidneys, so giving one away isn't a big deal. Wouldn't it be nice to do something good? I'm not in good health, and donating a kidney could put my life at risk. I'm not signing anything." I outright rejected Serafina's request and tossed the agreement onto the ground, stomping on it a few times. When she saw I wouldn't cooperate, tears immediately filled her eyes, and she started crying uncontrollably. She hurried to the door, flung it open, and sobbed, "Thaddeus, how can you be so heartless? As long as you're willing to sign, you can save an innocent life. Is your life as a rich person really more important than anyone else's? Do other lives not matter?" Employees in the company heard the commotion and started huddling in the corners to watch. Seeing more and more onlookers gather, Serafina cried even harder. She put on a pitiful act, kneeling on the ground and grabbing my pants, desperately begging. It felt like I was the one putting her in this position, just watching with no empathy at all. "Thaddeus, please show some mercy. This is a life we're talking about." I wanted to pull Serafina up, but the pain in my stomach left me too weak to do anything. The staff were standing by, quietly whispering to each other, exchanging hushed words. The lives of ordinary people matter too. The boss lady pleaded with him, but he didn't budge at all. My God, he usually seems kind, but now he's so heartless. Everyone is talking to Serafina, and I'm feeling more and more pale. Serafina has this smug smile on her face as she shakes my body, trying to get me to give in. "Thaddeus, just sign already. It's as easy as just moving a finger for you." My stomach churned, and I felt completely drained. My legs went weak, and I collapsed to the ground. Serafina thought I was just pretending, trying to make a scene. She stood up and kicked me hard, right in front of everyone. "Thaddeus, I really can't stand you," she said, then turned and walked away. I felt my consciousness slipping away, lying on the ground, barely holding on. A wave of iron-tinged sweetness rushed up my throat, making me cough uncontrollably, and I ended up spitting out a pool of blood. The staff quickly surrounded me, shouting loudly, "Boss, are you okay? Call 120, quick, call 120. Their voices echoed through the corridor. Serafina must have heard them. I struggled to open my eyes and caught a glimpse of her cold back, feeling a quiet ache in my heart. "As long as you're willing to glance at me, I won't be mad anymore." I prayed for that moment countless times, yet Serafina never looked my way. When I woke up again, I found myself in a hospital bed, receiving in 4. The doctor stood beside me, sighing. He said, "Young person, you really need to take better care of yourself. If you keep pushing yourself like this, you might end up with lung cancer." A tight feeling gripped me as I suddenly wondered if Serafina would be sad if I got lung cancer. Before I could sort out my thoughts, she walked in holding a bowl of clear noodle soup. There was a hint of guilt on her face, and she didn't dare to look up at me. I waved her over, and she bit her lip as she slowly came closer. Serafina weakly wrapped her arms around my waist, her eyes a bit red, like she had been crying quietly. I'm so sorry, Thaddeus. The voice was choked with emotion. I didn't realize how much seeing Serafina cry would affect me. My heart just broke for her. I gently stroked her hair and reassured her. It's okay. I don't blame you. Yet deep down, I knew I still felt a bit uneasy. We shared a brief moment of tenderness, but just then her phone buzzed with a notification. Feeling a bit flustered, she glanced up at me and smiled slightly. The porridge I got for you is here. I'm going to get it. She probably didn't realize that ever since she looked at her phone, there was a clear smile on her face. I held back the sharp pain and quietly followed behind Serafina. After passing through a few long hallways, I saw her turn into another hospital room. I leaned against the door to sneak a peek. Inside, Serafina was warmly hugging a man's neck, sharing an intimate kiss. Serafina playfully nudged him and said in a teasing tone, "You're so annoying. What's the rush? I'm your man, you know?" He had seen the guy before. Serafina had a whole album of him on her phone. He had stumbled upon it once, and Serafina proudly pointed to the pictures, lifting her chin as she said, "This is my crush, my first love. He's incredibly handsome." She added, "You're really nothing compared to him. If only I could marry someone like him." The man's hand wandered over Serafina's chest, lifting her thin clothing. "When are you planning to get your husband to sign?" he asked. "Don't you want to see me healthy and then marry me?" Hearing those words, everything clicked. Serafina had been using my money to take care of her first love. She actually funded that man for 3 whole years. That was her first love, the one she couldn't forget. I was stunned. I accidentally brushed against the doorknob, and it made a sharp noise. The 2 people in the hospital room turned to look at me at the same time. Who was it? Serafina jumped off the bed, looking anxious. I heard her hurried footsteps. I gripped the doorknob and slowly turned it. Just before Serafina opened the door, pain made me curl up in the corner. Caspian followed her out and wrapped his arms around Serafina from behind. "Serafina, don't be so anxious. The wind keeps making that door creak. You should really convince your husband to donate a kidney to me." Serafina smiled and said, "Don't worry. I plan to be a bit gentler this time. Whenever I act cute, Thaddeus always gives me whatever I want." Serafina knows that my love for her will never change. In our 3 years of marriage, I've given her everything she desired. When she said she liked islands, I bought her several. When she wanted to see the northern lights in the Arctic, I dropped my important meeting and flew halfway across the world with her. I curled up in the corner, holding my cold body and forcing a bitter smile. I returned to the ward before Serafina, lying on the bed and staring blankly at the ceiling. I had no idea when Serafina came in, but she was holding a bowl of congee. This congee was meant for Caspian first, but after taking a sip, he found it tasted awful and spat it out. Serafina insisted it shouldn't go to waste, so she brought it back for me to eat. I stared at her as she effortlessly opened the box. She scooped a spoonful of porridge, ready to feed me. A bittersweet smile crept onto my lips as I asked, "Serafina, are you really going to make me drink this?" She paused for a moment, her face showing a bit of embarrassment, before quickly putting on a light smile. "Of course, the doctor said you need to eat something light. Once you're out of the hospital, I can make you some stir-fried meat. All right?" I frowned and looked at Serafina with disappointment. "Serafina, I've never been a big fan of meat." Seeing my reaction, her face turned angry. She angrily tossed the porridge into the trash and asked me what was going on. "Thaddeus, what's up with this drama? You don't like meat. So was that dish I made for the dog. I've been so nice to you, and yet you still pick at everything every day." "I've already said it. I'm not your maid. To be honest, I don't really like meat. I'm just eating it because Serafina made it. I didn't want to ruin the mood." I pushed myself to eat those greasy chunks just to see her happy smile. Then Serafina stormed out, giving me a glare before she left. "Thaddeus, whether you like it or not, you have to donate a kidney. If you refuse, we'll get a divorce. This is all we're talking about right now." Serafina's words cut through me like a sharp knife, stabbing deep into my heart. Lying in bed, I asked my assistant to help me find a top divorce lawyer. Since Serafina doesn't love me, I shouldn't keep tying her down with marriage. It's time to let her go free and set myself free too. When I got home from the hospital, I was surprised to see that Serafina had made a whole spread of food for me. She had a green bracelet on her wrist, a family heirloom my mom gave her when she was alive. Serafina smiled as she took my coat, and even gave my shoulders a little rub. Thaddeus, I've thought it through, and I shouldn't pressure you. If you don't want to donate a kidney, then don't. Serafina pulled me over to the dinner table and served me some food. Her eyes were sparkling with excitement as she urged, "You have to try this nice, light dish I just learned to make." I wasn't sure if Serafina was trying to hold on to me, but my decision about the divorce was already made. Serafina brought over my favorite corn rib soup. The corn was sweet, but it couldn't mask the bitterness I felt inside. I wolfed down my food, eager to finish, so I could talk with Serafina about getting a divorce. After the meal, I felt a bit dizzy. That's when Serafina took the chance to come over to me, pulling out a familiar donation agreement from the drawer of the coffee table. I felt drained, and her figure blurred in my vision. Everything felt hazy. "What did you put in the food, Serafina?" I said through clenched teeth, pushing the meal away in anger. Serafina looked down at me, casually twirling a pen between her fingers. "Oh, just some sleeping pills. Don't worry, Thaddeus. Just take a nap, and you'll be fine," she added. "I've already signed the divorce papers you gave me. Soon, we'll each go our separate ways." The divorce agreement had already arrived from the lawyer. I thought Serafina was completely oblivious, but suddenly she understood everything and wanted to save our marriage. She grabbed my wrist and signed my name on the donation agreement with determination. I struggled fiercely, but my wrist was growing weaker, and I could only submit to Serafina's control. The door swung open, and just before I shut my eyes, I saw a group of people in white coats carrying a stretcher. I fought back with all my strength and weakly pleaded, "Please, don't agree to her." Tears streamed down my face, and everything started to fade away. I completely lost consciousness. In that hazy state, I felt a cold blade pressed against my skin, as if something was being cut out. Tears flowed freely, but inside, it was as if my heart had turned to stone. When I finally opened my eyes again, I saw that my body was covered with all sorts of tubes. The room felt so empty. Not even a nurse in sight. My lips were chapped, and I reached for the cup of water on the bedside table. Just then, Serafina walked in and leaned against the door with a slight smile. She kindly tried to help me with the cup, but ended up spilling all the water out the window. "Thaddeus, I really appreciate it. Your kidneys are in great shape, and Caspian will recover soon. Thanks for signing the divorce papers. I finally feel free." Serafina proudly flipped her collar, revealing a patch of red spots. There was a glint of amusement in her eyes. "See, Caspian really packed a punch. He made me hurt so much." Feeling anxious, she couldn't hold back and coughed up some blood. Serafina took a step back. "Thaddeus, you don't want to pin this on me, do you? Stop pretending you're coughing up blood." The monitor was beeping loudly. I was lying in bed, my body shaking uncontrollably. The ECG was going off too, with its lines jumping wildly. Blood kept pouring from my mouth, and Serafina was calling out in a panic. She rushed out the door, leaving me alone in the hospital room. Every part of the body hurts, as if being crushed under a heavy weight. The doctor rushes in, shouting for the patient to be moved to emergency care. They call in all the specialists because there are clear signs of rejection. My vision blurs, and I catch a glimpse of Serafina huddled in a corner, watching me. Her fingers are shaking uncontrollably, and she looks so small, her face full of disbelief as she murmurs, "How could this happen? Was the surgery not very successful? I spent the whole day and night in the emergency room, and we've run out of blood bags in the bank." The doctor called in Serafina and asked if Caspian could donate blood. Serafina was really upset. It was like a sore spot had been touched. She furrowed her brows and shouted angrily that Caspian couldn't do it. He was already weak and couldn't give blood. "Doctor, if Thaddeus can't be saved, then just let him go peacefully. Don't let him suffer too much." I still held onto a glimmer of hope, but Serafina urged the doctor to let me go. Luckily, I was eventually discharged. I spent a whole month in the ICU, and not once did Serafina come to see me. Her smiling face in the entertainment news on my phone felt so ironic. Over the past month, she and Caspian have made headlines multiple times, with fans calling them a sweet couple to look up to. Serafina really knows how to be romantic. She even booked a luxury cruise for Caspian's birthday, putting in a lot of effort to make him happy. I opened my phone case and pulled out a simple red string that was hidden inside. It was a birthday gift from Serafina, even though it was a cheap item we ordered together. I took a pair of scissors and cut the red string, marking the end of the last sentiment between me and Serafina. Serafina bought Caspian a Cullinan and gifted him high-end designer clothes. But what she gives me is always those cheap $9.99 t-shirts from street vendors. It seems like Serafina knows how to love, just not me. After leaving the hospital, I started throwing myself into work to numb the pain. I decided to sell the apartment we bought together. I had the cleaning crew throw out everything Serafina left behind. I thought I'd never see her again. But when she showed up in front of me with her hair all messy, it hit me hard. There was a clear handprint on her face, red and painful to look at. When she saw me, her eyes were filled with tears, and she rushed over with her arms wide open. I turned to the side to dodge her hug and even brushed off my clothes where she'd touched them, feeling a bit disgusted. "What are you doing here?" I frowned, unsure of what Serafina was up to this time. She bit her lower lip, looking pale. "I'm sorry, Thaddeus. I know I messed up." Tears streamed down her face as she inched closer to me, seeking comfort. She probably thought that if she cried, I'd just hold her like I used to. I took a step back, looking at Serafina's tear-filled eyes with a cool smile. "It's over between us, Serafina." She froze, nervously fidgeting with her fingers, her lips bleeding from biting them. She lifted her head and cautiously studied my face, managing to force out a smile that looked worse than crying. "Thaddeus, are you still mad at me? Please, don't be mad. Okay? I know you still love me. I love you too. Let's get married again." I ignored Serafina's words and walked away. As I passed her, she looked so pathetic, grabbing my hand and forcing our fingers to interlock. "Thaddeus, you can't deny it. You still love me." I yanked my hand away from Serafina, and she lost her balance, crashing hard to the ground. Her knees scraped against the rough surface, blood oozing out. But honestly, compared to what I went through in the ICU, this was nothing. The pain from coughing up blood was way worse than what she was feeling. In this shattered love story, I was already battered and bruised. Without any expression, I stepped over Serafina's legs and coldly said, "Serafina, I don't love you anymore." Serafina froze, sitting there like a statue, tears streaming down her face one after another. But there was no pain in my heart for her anymore. I was seated at my desk, busy looking over the documents my assistant had just handed me. Serafina somehow came in, holding a cup of coffee in her hand. She walked over to me and smiled as she set the coffee down beside me. I shot her a cold glance and said, "Serafina, stop wasting time. I won't forgive you, and I won't remarry you." Serafina crouched by my feet, carefully lifting her skirt to reveal her pale calves. My initials, XM, were etched clearly on her smooth skin. Serafina pointed at the tattoo, her voice filled with a mix of hurt and emotion. "Thaddeus, I really love you." I chuckled and playfully rubbed her calf with my fingers. The tattoo immediately began to blur, the faint black ink spreading. She quickly covered her calf and said, "Thaddeus, don't touch me. Stop rubbing." I reached into the drawer and pulled out the tracking report for Serafina's whereabouts over the past month, then tossed it heavy onto her. Serafina suddenly leaned back and landed hard on the ground. After our divorce, she still hadn't changed her habit of spending money like it was water. Her first love, Caspian, was really just a guy who liked to rely on others. Serafina used the money she earned after we got married to buy him a car and a house. She even took him on trips around the world, and in the end, she blew through all her cash. To make matters worse, Caspian was already married abroad. Right after the surgery, his wife flew back to the country to pick him up. She happened to walk in on Caspian and Serafina getting cozy on the bed. To dodge the confrontation, Caspian lied and claimed that Serafina was the one who came on to him. Furious, his wife gave Serafina a brutal beating and even used Serafina's nude photos to blackmail her for all her money. Now, Serafina is completely broke. Meanwhile, Caspian disappeared with his wife, leaving no trace behind. After losing everything, Serafina finally remembered me. I casually crossed my legs, a sarcastic smile on my face. "Seriously, Serafina, what are you thinking? Why would I still need you?" Frustrated, she grabbed the papers from the floor and ripped them into shreds. Kneeling at my feet, she said softly, "Thaddeus, I truly messed up. I was tricked by Caspian. He told me that if I treated him well, he would." As Serafina spoke, her voice started to fade away. It was like she was too scared to continue. I jumped in and said, "He'll marry you, treat you right, and love you for a lifetime." Serafina sat there on the ground, staring blankly, her tears flowing freely as she scrubbed at her face. I took hold of her chin, forcing her to look up at me. Gritting my teeth, I said, Serafina, haven't I made those promises to you? Haven't I done enough for you? I'm willing to give you everything you want. Serafina avoided my gaze, as if she couldn't handle the closeness between us. She sobbed helplessly, whispering for my forgiveness. Thaddeus, can you give me one more chance? I promise. This time I'll truly treat you right. I lifted my shirt, revealing a terrifying scar. Serafina gasped, her face contorted in pain as she screamed. I made her look at the tangled scars on my body, saying, Serafina, these are all you're doing? Just look at this. How can I still love you after this? She yanked her hand away from mine and bolted towards the door in a flurry. She was really panicking, even dropping one of her shoes, but still kept running ahead. I glanced at the camera in the corner and let out a deep sigh. I had turned her down several times, yet she still didn't give up. I informed the security not to let her back in. Serafina stood waiting for me at the company entrance. The employees around her recognized her and started whispering, questioning how she dared to show up again. What a thick skin. The boss nearly got ruined because of her. She's such a despicable character, a blight on society, even though people were trash-talking her. Serafina looked pale but still tried to force a friendly smile. She handed out lunchboxes to everyone, but someone roughly shoved them to the ground. Food splattered everywhere, and that greasy smell filled the air, which was pretty off-putting. Serafina, how much longer do you plan to keep this up? Security, get her out of here. I don't want to see her again. The security guard rushed over to ask Serafina to leave, but she refused and started shouting in anger. With no other option, the guard had to drag her out. Just then, Rosalind came by to discuss a collaboration. She walked over in high heels and a long red dress. Leaning casually on my shoulder, she teased, Thaddeus, looks like you're having some good luck with the ladies. Serafina spotted the woman next to me and angrily smacked the guard's arm. Let go of me. Can't you see that vixen trying to seduce my husband? Serafina's expression darkened, and her words were harsh. You homewrecker, get away from my husband. Do you think I don't know who you are? You flirtatious vixen? I feel a headache coming on. I frown and signal the security to get this loud woman out of here. Keep your distance. It's just too noisy. Rosalind kisses my cheek, and it's so frustrating to watch. She even waves at Serafina. Thaddeus is just so noble and charming. I'm almost falling for him. Meanwhile, Serafina looks furious, her eyes wide as if she's ready to jump in and tear her apart. I could only manage a wry smile as I reached out to Rosalind. All right, let's not poke at her anymore. Rosalind should really spend more time on the plan. Maybe then I'd be willing to give you a bit of a discount. She flashed me a playful wink, her fingers tracing circles on my chest. Thaddeus, are you spinning tales now? Her words made me laugh, and the tension on my forehead finally eased away. After settling the collaboration with Rosalind, we headed to the charity gala together. At the event, Rosalind swirled her glass of red wine and warmly asked me, Thaddeus, will you be my dance partner tonight? The situation with Serafina had me feeling a bit stressed, but dancing seemed like a good way to unwind. I took Rosalind's hand and walked into the shimmering lights. A faint scent will let me in. I'm Thaddeus's wife. If you dare to mess with me, I swear I'll get you fired. Serafina lunged at someone, scratching and clawing, completely losing her composure. Rosalind was the first to step in to help. She grabbed a bottle of champagne and poured it right over Serafina's head. The champagne shocked Serafina so much that she couldn't keep her eyes open and stumbled away in embarrassment. Who are you? You're crazy. Stop it. Seeing Serafina in such a messy state, there was a strange thrill in the heart. Serafina slipped in quietly while the security guard wasn't looking. With wide eyes, she reached out to grab Rosalind's face. I quickly pulled Rosalind into my arms, evading Serafina's attack. The pianist's mask fell to the ground, and the music stopped instantly. The room fell silent. Serafina caught a glimpse of the pianist's face and screamed in shock. She grabbed a knife and fork and rushed toward him. Caspian, how could you make me suffer like this and still have the nerve to show your face? Serafina climbed onto the stage and started yelling at Caspian without holding back. I watched from the sidelines, signaling security to clear the crowd. Caspian was someone I hired at great expense, and even Serafina had no clue he was a pianist. I could tell Serafina was seething inside. If she ran into Caspian again, there was no way she'd let him off easy. Caspian was stuck in his seat, watching in horror as Serafina charged toward him like a wild person. Serafina, don't come over here. Stay back. But Serafina was so overwhelmed by life's pressures that she couldn't hear him at all. Caspian, this is all your fault. If you hadn't ruined my marriage with Thaddeus, I wouldn't be in this mess. I wouldn't be begging for scraps. I'd still be the classy Mrs. Thaddeus. Serafina aimed the knife and fork at Caspian's throat and plunged them in. Blood gushed out, splattering everywhere. In a panic, she dropped the knife and fork, and when she saw her hands covered in blood, she started to cry. Ah! I've killed someone. I've killed someone. I saw this coming all along. I stood quietly in the corner, watching Serafina panic and run away. She spotted me in the crowd right away and rushed over, stumbling as she came, tears and snot smeared across her face, looking both pitiful and infuriating. Thaddeus, please save me. Help me. I didn't mean to kill him. I don't want to go to jail. I really don't want to go to jail. Serafina clung to my shirt, her grip tight and desperate. I glanced at Caspian lying in a pool of blood, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He stole my kidney, so he definitely had to pay for it. Sirens blared outside, and Serafina's face turned even paler with panic. She pulled out the necklace from around her neck and pleaded with me. Thaddeus, do you remember? This is the necklace you gave me. You love me, right? I let go of Serafina's hand and walked toward the police who had burst into the hall. The USB drive in my pocket felt warm from my grip, and I handed it directly to the officer. Officer, this contains evidence of Serafina's murder and illegal organ harvesting. I knew Serafina wouldn't just let go of her first love and the idea of me giving her a kidney. That's why I set up cameras at home beforehand. But I never expected that I meant so little to her. She drugged me when I wasn't prepared at all. Serafina looked at me, completely broken, her body shaking. Thaddeus, why don't you love me anymore? Why did you betray me? I stood across from her, light spilling onto my face. My throat felt raw, my words heavy with repressed bitterness. So I wanted to ask you, do you really love me? Do you love me more than I love myself? When I was on the brink of collapse, you were out having fun with Caspian. Did you ever think about me at all? Serafina sat weakly on the ground, her fingers gripping the hem of her dress tightly. This isn't how it's supposed to be. I was just tricked by him. I really do love you. But she didn't deserve to talk about love. She was too selfish and cold, never able to learn how to truly love someone. The police handcuffed her hands behind her back, and she let out a few pained cries. As they led her toward the car, she kept throwing me desperate looks, begging me, Thaddeus, help me, please. I watched her being taken away in the police car, while Caspian was loaded into an ambulance that had rushed to the scene. His chest was rising and falling slightly. I could still see he was breathing. Caspian pulled through at the hospital, but his vocal cords were severely damaged, and he won't be able to speak again. Serafina and Caspian were sentenced, and they'll be in prison for a long time. I heard from the lawyer that Serafina wants to see me. I agreed. I want to figure out what her plans are. Through the glass window, I noticed Serafina has some gray hairs showing at her temples. In just a week, she looked noticeably older, and her cheeks had sunk in. When she saw me, Serafina got really excited and started banging on the window. Thaddeus, Thaddeus, she called out, taking off the necklace around her neck and handing it back to me. The charm had our initials engraved on it. In front of Serafina, I tossed the necklace into the trash without a second thought. She stared at me intently, her eyes filled with tears. Thaddeus, why can't you just forgive me? I know I messed up. Serafina pretended to cry, her eyes swollen like walnuts. I glanced at her coldly, deleting photo after photo of her from my phone. Serafina opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end, no words came out. Her face was filled with bitterness, and a sorrowful expression lingered. Thaddeus, would you feel relieved if I died? I let out a cold laugh and shook my head. Go ahead and die. I'd feel even worse inside. I couldn't understand why I had to suffer so much while it seemed so easy for you to just end things. Serafina paused for a moment, then slowly lowered her hand. With a bitter smile, she replied, Okay, I get it. I'll carry my repentance for your sins all the way to the grave. Serafina kept acting in that moment. I had been fooled by her performance for 3 years. I wasn't going to fall for it again. Serafina seemed like she wanted to say more, but I had already stood up and walked away. The air outside the prison felt incredibly refreshing. I checked my phone and saw the schedule my assistant had arranged. Keep pushing yourself. Aim to reach higher and truly forget Serafina and the pain she brought into your life.